The Curse of the Spirit in the Reborn Baby. A true horror story, what you are about to hear, is not just any story. This is a story that begins in a seemingly ordinary house, with an ordinary woman, who for a moment found herself overcome by a desire so strong that without knowing it she awakened something ancient and terrible, something that was dormant, waiting to be found, waiting to be freed. Lara, a woman full of expectations and dreams, never imagined that her life would change so radically when she acquired the reborn baby doll. That doll, with its frighteningly perfect details, its empty and deep eyes, would be just a toy. Or so she thought. However, what was about to happen to her and her house was a tragedy written by the hands of a vengeful spirit. This is not a fictional story. What you are going to hear today is an account based on a real event, or at least that is what many believe. A story that has been kept secret until now. Get ready, because you are about to embark on a terrifying journey, full of mystery and terror. What you are about to discover may change the way you view these realistic dolls forever. Lara has always been a lonely woman. She was 34 years old, and although she was successful in her work as an interior designer, her heart was empty. After a failed marriage and several failed attempts to get pregnant, Lara found herself trapped in a cycle of loneliness and sadness. She wanted a child, but life had only given her pain and disappointment. She began to look for alternative ways to fill this void, trying to fill the space in her life with objects and experiences that would distract her from what she really wanted. It was one summer afternoon, surfing the internet, that Lara found something that immediately fascinated her. A reborn baby doll. A perfect replica of a newborn, made with a frightening level of realism. Its eyes are large and crystal clear, its skin soft and vivid, and the minute details of its hands and feet. For Lara, it wasn't just a toy. It was a chance to have something that came close to having a child, even if it was just an illusion. Without hesitation, she bought the doll. When the doll arrived, Lara could hardly believe how perfect it was. She dressed it in delicate clothes and carefully placed it in her bed. The doll looked so real that at night Lara even found herself looking at it as if it were a real baby. Her heart, full of longing and desire, quickly became attached to this creation. But as the days passed, something strange began to happen. On the first night, Lara woke up to a muffled sound coming from the room. It was a cry that sounded like it was coming from a baby. She got up quickly, heart racing, and went to the doll's room. When she entered, everything was silent, except for the sound of the wind hitting the windows. Lara looked at the doll, which was on her bed, but what bothered her was a small but disturbing detail. The doll's eyes were slightly open, and she felt as if she were being watched. At first, Lara thought it was just her imagination, perhaps the result of exhaustion. But as the nights passed, the crying became louder, clearer. It wasn't just the sound of a baby, but the sound of someone in pain, as if asking for help. Lara, already obsessed with the doll, began to wonder if she was losing her mind. At one of these moments, while trying to sleep, she had a nightmare. The dream seemed so real that Lara couldn't tell the difference between what was a dream and what was reality. She found herself in an old mansion surrounded by shadows. A woman, her face hidden by darkness, was standing in front of her, holding a baby. But it wasn't just any baby. The baby's body was deformed, with completely black eyes and pale skin. The woman looked at Lara with a piercing gaze, as if she were trying to communicate without words. Then she whispered, "You're next." Lara woke up with her heart racing and a feeling that something was wrong. The doll was no longer in the bed. It was on the floor, turned over. A strange sensation took hold of her, as if the reborn baby was moving, as if it had a will of its own. It was at that moment that Lara decided to investigate the story of the doll. She spent hours and hours researching online, and finally found an old story, a yellowed letter that seemed to tell the story of a macabre ritual. The letter spoke of a woman named Rosa, who, after the death of her newborn son, searched for ways to bring her son's soul back to life. She had found an old book of witchcraft that taught her a powerful ritual, which mixed black magic and forbidden prayers. What Rosa brought back, however, was not the spirit of her son. It was an evil entity, a vengeful being that instead of an innocent baby, occupied the body of the doll. And even worse, the spirit needed a new guardian, someone who would attach herself to the doll in such a way that her soul would be linked to the spirit trapped within. This being condemned to live forever needed a new body, and with each new guardian, it grew stronger, consuming the life energy of the person who cared for the doll. With a heavy heart, Lara realized what was happening. She had become the victim of the curse. As the weeks passed, the events became more and more intense. Lara began to feel pains in her chest, a constant pressure, as if her energy were being sucked out. Her eyes began to grow dull, and her health deteriorated rapidly. She could no longer sleep, was always exhausted, and the feeling of being watched became unbearable. It was then that she found an ancient grimoire hidden in a shop of esoteric items and read about a ritual that could banish the spirit from the doll. But the price was too high. Whoever performed the ritual would have to sacrifice their own life to seal the entity. Lara knew her life was hanging by a thread, but she also knew that without this last attempt, she would be consumed completely. Desperate, she began to prepare the ritual. Surrounded by the shadows she seemed to see all around her, she knew that if she failed, her fate would be sealed forever. As she finished the ritual, with one last tear in her eyes, Lara whispered the final words. But before she could complete it, something interrupted her. The reborn baby somehow moved, its eyes fixed on her, and a hissing voice sounded in her mind. "You cannot escape." The woman's spirit, now stronger than ever, pulled her into the doll. Lara screamed, but the voice silenced her. At the last moment, her body was taken over by an invisible force, and she disappeared, leaving only the void, with the doll on her bed. What happened after that is a mystery. Some say that Lara's spirit, now trapped along with Rosa and her son, continues to inhabit the doll. Others claim that at night, if you approach Lara's house, you can hear a baby crying and a woman whispering desperately for help. But the truth is that no one has ever found Lara's house again. She disappeared, just like the doll. Now the doll remains somewhere, waiting for the next heart to be seduced by its silent plea. And if you ever hear a cry at night coming from an empty house, remember, you are not hearing a baby. You are hearing a spirit crying for your soul. Lara's story spread slowly, whispered by word of mouth among those who loved the macabre, the inexplicable, the occult. And each time someone mentioned her name, the story took on a darker form, as if the memory of her death fed on each new version, each new fear created. But something even more disturbing happened. Over time, rumors began to emerge about the doll. They said that whoever saw it, whoever touched it, would begin to feel the same attraction that Lara felt, that obsession that could not be controlled. Some even claimed that a reborn doll identical to Lara's had been seen in esoteric shops in several cities, as if somehow it was multiplying, spreading the curse from city to city, from house to house. But what people didn't know, what they couldn't understand, was that this doll wasn't just looking for a new victim. It was waiting. She was waiting for someone who, like Lara, was fragile, lonely, lost enough to surrender to her power. One night, in a distant city, a young woman named Clara, who was also going through emotional difficulties and had a heart marked by loss and frustration, found an online ad for a reborn baby doll for sale. As she looked at the photos, a strange feeling came over her. It was as if the doll was calling her, as if something inside her recognized the connection. Clara felt alone, and the idea of having a companion, even if it was just a doll, seemed comforting. Without hesitation, she bought the toy, unaware of the tragedy that hid behind her creation. The doll arrived at her home a few days later. Just like Lara, Clara was impressed by the perfection of the piece. The skin looked real, the eyes were large and piercing, and every detail was exactly what she imagined a real baby would look like. Clara felt an indescribable sensation, as if the void in her heart was momentarily filled. But soon the same sounds began to happen. Clara heard the crying coming from the doll's room, saw the baby's eyes move, and each night, something in her mind told her that she was not alone. She tried to resist, but the doll's presence seemed to dominate the room, invading her thoughts. Then she began to have nightmares, just like Lara had before. In one of the dreams, Clara saw the same woman with her face covered, holding a deformed baby. The woman looked at her with a cruel smile and said, "You're next, Clara. The baby is waiting." Clara woke up sweaty and scared, but when she looked at the doll, something surprised her. The doll's eyes were fixed on her, more intense than ever, and it was at that moment that she felt a growing pain in her chest, a feeling that her energy was being drained, as if the doll was sucking her soul. She tried to resist, but it was too late. The connection had already been made, and the spirit that possessed the doll had marked her. As Clara tried to find answers, she discovered the story of Rosa and her desperate quest to bring her son back to life. She read the accounts of the ritual, and as she understood what was happening, she realized that there was no escape. The doll, like the spirit, was now bound to her, and what was at stake was no longer a simple obsession. It was a battle for her own life. As Clara desperately tried to free herself, her health began to decline rapidly. She could barely get out of bed, and an unbearable pain took over her chest. More and more, she felt the eyes of the doll watching her, as if it were waiting for the right moment to consume her completely. It was then that, in a last-ditch effort, Clara searched for any way to destroy the doll, to put an end to the curse that had begun with Rosa and continued through Lara. She found an ancient formula that could undo the ritual, but the price was high. The doll's spirit demanded a final sacrifice, a final victim who would give herself body and soul to break the cycle. Clara, with tears in her eyes, did what she thought was the only way to save her soul. She performed the ritual with fear and resignation, offering her life to break the bond between the doll and the entity. But as Rosa's spirit had already predicted, Clara was not capable of completing the sacrifice alone. The doll moved once more, and before Clara could do anything, the entity pulled her into the darkness. And just like Lara before her, Clara disappeared. The doll remained, impassive, on her bed. The years passed, and Clara's story was lost in time. But the doll, this cursed doll, continued to haunt the shadows of the cities. Some say that it still circulates among auctions of esoteric items, sold as a rare and precious piece, without knowing what it really carries with it. If you hear crying when passing by a store that sells reborn dolls, or if you feel a strange presence when approaching one of them, you may be looking at something more than a toy. Perhaps you are facing a spirit that waits, silently and patiently, for its next victim. The question is, would you dare to approach? Or will you, like Clara and Lara, already be marked before you even know it? If you like this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more mysteries and terrifying stories. And before I leave, I need to ask you one last question. Do you believe in spirits? Or maybe, are you starting to wonder what is hidden in every perfect doll you see around? Until next time, and remember, evil does not forget, and it never stops looking for its next victim.